Alright, what's up guys? So, my name's Zilreth. I was a Grandmaster 1 Storm main in Season 0 for Marvel Rivals, and now that Season 1 is out, I think I want to share some of my tips since our girl Storm here got a lot of buffs, so I think she's going to be viable, more viable than she was before, but not that I didn't think she was viable, because I managed to climb to Grandmaster with her before, so now I think she's going to be very, very strong. You're probably going to see her in a lot of games, so if you want to play her, I'm going to give you some tips for playing her against every single hero in the game. General positioning strategies, walk through her abilities and everything. And then we're also at the end going to discuss a little bit on how to play against her as well, since you're probably going to be doing more of that. So, all right, let's start with her abilities. All right, so her primary fire, Windblade. Pretty simple, just a cleave shot. In Season 1, it now moves 150 meters a second, up from 100 in Season 0, so you should have a little bit of an easier time hitting distant targets or moving targets. So I think that will be a huge buff in and of itself, but it also does 55 damage now, instead of the 50 that it did in Season 0. There's also quite considerable damage fall off on it, though. The aura radius around you here is 15 meters, and past that, the damage fall off begins. And at twice that distance is when the damage fall off is at its max of just 50%. So you're going to be doing very little damage from a distance, but do keep in mind that this ability also cleaves through multiple enemies. So what I mean by cleaving is that if you want to shoot one person in the front, it'll hit everyone else behind them too, unless it hits some kind of shield or other obstacle between them. So keep that in mind. You have 12 rounds. You should probably only reload while you're in cover if you can. So make sure you position properly when you use that. Now let's talk about the secondary fire. So the secondary fire is a 40-meter long lightning bolt. So you can see 30 meters here. I'm roughly 40 meters away. This is about the max distance that you can use this from. It is up to 80 damage from 70 damage in Season 0. It has a 1-meter radius, which means that you don't have to aim it quite perfectly. You can aim it a little bit to the sides, and it'll cleave everybody along the way as well. So both her primary and her secondary fire both cleave. This ability is great for finishing off distant targets, since especially your damage fall off will set in at farther distances, especially past 30 meters. You won't be doing very much anymore. But if you can still land your right click, it'll still do the full 80 damage, no fall off on that. All right, now let's talk about her aura a little bit here. So you have this 15-meter sphere aura around you. You can see it as you move. The line crosses over everything that's within 15 meters of you. It seems to expand as you go lower because the radius is able to reach farther out. So a lot of the times when you're fighting people, you kind of want to be at the same level as them or directly above them to make it harder for them to hit you. All right, so let's talk about the two modes here.
I see them.
So you can be in tornado mode, which basically just amplifies all of your allies and your own movement speed. So it makes allies 8% faster and you 16% faster. And then there's also thunder mode. That increases damage for the same amount. So 8% for her teammates and 16% for Storm. Now let's talk about her E. So her E will just amp up that aura for 8 seconds and then go on cooldown for 15 seconds again. When in tornado mode, if you amp up, you will amp up your movement speed to 20%. Or your allies' movement speed to 20%, up from 8% for the regular aura, and then her self-move speed will go to 40%, up from 16% with the regular aura. Something else of note, it does slow down enemies when you use it as well. You can see this little tornado under them. That means that they're getting slowed by 15%. So if you're speeding your allies up by 20 and slowing them by 15, you can pretty much chase down any target if they're trying to run away from your team. So keep that in mind. It's great for pushing in and taking space after a team fight and making sure you get every last person to stagger them as long as you can. Now, when you amp up the thunder mode here, it'll shock everybody for 35 damage. It's actually a little more than 35, though, because, as I said before, it amps up your damage as well. So it boosts ally damage 12%, up from 8% for the regular aura, and it boosts your self damage 30%, up from 16%. So really the amount of damage that it does is around 45, since that's 35 damage times 1.3, so adding the 30% damage, so it actually does more like 45. A little under, I think. Someone can do the math on that one. But it ticks 4 times, so it ticks once immediately when you activate it, once at 6 seconds, once at 4 seconds, and once at 2 seconds. it does not tick again once it hits 0. So it only ticks 4 times. Something that you can do, a little tip on how to position yourself while you use that too. Let's say we're trying to kill this bot here. So we can pop it. We can go out of cover a little bit. We can pop back up. We can pop back up every 2 seconds and attack them then. So to make sure that we get that burst every 2 seconds, we can just attack them along with our aura as it ticks. So a little tip on that one there. We'll discuss more about that later as well. Now let's talk about her ultimate ability. So her ultimate ability is called Omega Hurricane. And basically, you use it. You have 5 seconds to activate it somewhere. You get to move around very quickly. You can right-click to zoom out, and it will put you up vertically as well if you want to position yourself like that. If you want to get onto high ground, make sure you use that function. A lot of the times it's better to start at high ground if you can. If there's anyone on high ground, you should use it up top, and then they'll jump down, and then you can drop down there as well. It also makes it harder to detect. Say you're down here on the ground, and the hurricane gets triggered up there. There's actually about a 1 second period where once you activate it, it takes like a second to wind up. So if you look at it right here, it's like bam, and then it takes like a whole second right there before it actually starts dealing damage. So that gives them advance warning. But if you do it on high ground and then you drop down on them after, they won't see that zone because it'll be above them, right? So then you can drop down on them and they won't notice. So that one does 75 damage twice per second for a total of 150 damage a second. It disables your aura, so keep that in mind. You won't be buffing your teammates or yourself anymore while you're using it. It's an 8-meter spherical radius, so it's not like a cylinder like the new Jeff ult is. It just hits a perfect sphere around your character. And then it also grants you 350 bonus health. So this is another part of the buffs that Storm received in Season 1 from Season 0, is that when you use the ultimate, it always gave you the same 350 bonus health. But now, once your ultimate ends, it slowly decays. You can see it ticking down there. It goes down 100 a second until you get back down to what you were before. Previously in Season 0, that bonus health would disappear immediately, so if you were in a bad position once you used your ultimate, that meant that the enemies could basically just burst you down as soon as you came out of it, and you would die almost every time if you didn't manage to kill everybody in the immediate vicinity. So usually what you'd have to do in Season 0 is use it, do a little damage, get a read on the battlefield, say, all right, time to retreat, and then you use the extra move speed from it to get back to your team a little bit. So you ended up losing some of the damage possibilities with it, but now you can stay in longer before you have to go back to your team because you have that extra bonus health. So that's also a huge buff to her. And then we also have the Thor Teamup ability, which we can go experiment with that one down in this lower room here. They have the Teamup stations here. We can simulate this ability. Where's Storm? I want to play as Storm here. So we get the Thor Teamup, and now we get this chain lightning ability. So it looks like it just zaps the ground there. Here, if we just quickly just start this so we can get some bots out here to show you what this looks like.
2, 1.
And it zaps everybody within 5 meters. Well, it can bounce up to 3 times. So it can hit 3 people. If you hit one target directly, it can jump to another, but they have to be within 5 meters of that target. So most of the time, you're better off hitting the ground between multiple targets, and it will zap them all. You can also hit people behind walls with that. So keep that in mind as well. It can help get that last bit of damage if someone's just around the corner. Now, this team-up also received a pretty large buff moving into Season 1. It used to do just 50 damage. Now it's 55 damage. And it used to be a 20-second cooldown, and now it's just 15. So that means that you can use it even more frequently for your burst potential. You can just throw it in along with your regular combos and, you know, do a ton of damage more frequently. So that's great. I think it's a great team up because I think her team up before Thor was a little bit weak. And it wasn't really worth playing with Thor. I think usually he's kind of a weaker frontliner tank, and Storm tends to work better with frontline tanks in my opinion. So we'll get into that as well. All right, but now we're just going to go over some movement and positioning type tips. So first off, you should be flying around all the time. You don't really want to just stay on the ground at all times. I mean, you do want to level change a little bit just to make it a little more unpredictable about where you're going to move. Otherwise, you're going to be a very, very easy target. So I recommend that you bind your descend, at least, to something else that is more accessible rather than control, unless you are comfortable hitting that as often. But I put my descend personally on mouse 4. Since I'm hitting it so much, it just makes it really convenient for me. So I can I can hold space, and then whenever I hit my mouse 4, I start descending, but otherwise I ascend. So I basically am almost always holding space to ascend and then descend with mouse 4. So I'm pretty much always moving up and down all times. All right, now let's get into some extra third-person camera tips. This is some other stuff we want to talk about. So obviously, as you probably know if you played the game already a lot, we have a third-person camera, which is kind of unusual. Say in Overwatch, it's first person, so you don't really have to worry about these types of things. But here, since we have the full characters on display, we do have to worry about the position of the camera versus the position of our character. So you mostly want to peek around right corners like this, because then you can easily peek in and out of cover and you can see what's going on the other side of the wall while you're here. Now, if you peek a left corner, say we're looking this way, you can't really see what's going on the other side of that wall unless you really angle your camera a lot. It's kind of hard to do that. And then also, if you want to attack out there, you have to fully expose yourself, while an enemy there will see you fully exposed before you can even take a shot on them. So just be aware, try to play around right corners as much as you can, and try to avoid left corners as much as you can. If you do have to use a left corner at some point, make sure if you peek in and out that you do constantly level change, because it'll help mitigate the damage just a little bit more, but overall recommended, try not to do that. Usually you're better off just trying to float all the way up and over them if they were over here, rather than just peeking out to the left, because it's so much more dangerous. Some other positioning tips here. So make sure that you're always thinking about what mode you're in. Make sure you know you're paying attention to what mode you're in. If you're ever moving around, or if you're just doing some simple poke damage, and there's not too many teammates around, you can stay in win mode just for the extra mobility. It'll make you harder to kill. But if you are with your team, or if you're trying to charge up your ultimate very quickly, trying to hit cleave shots on the enemy team, I'm going to go back out and show that again. Then you do want to be in damage mode, since that will, or thunder mode, I mean, because that will allow you to do much more damage, allow your allies to do more damage, and get their ultimates faster as well. Another little tip on how to use her primary fire here. So since it does cleave, notice that if I'm standing right next to a target and I shoot them here, it won't shoot the guy behind him if I aim here, because it's actually shooting from your character through that character, so it ends up hitting the wall behind them, right? So what you want to do when you set up these kinds of shots is always aim for the target in the back, right? If you aim for the target in the back and you line up, you try to imagine a line that goes like this, so your character's in a row with them, and then aim at the back target, then you'll manage to actually cleave through all of them. So make sure you're not ever fighting like from the side like this. If you fight straight on like this, you're gonna end up missing targets that you could hit that were behind them if you had moved just a little bit to the side. So that's another little third-person camera quirk you should consider while you're trying to position. So there's two main play styles that you should be using, that you should kind of be alternating between most games. So that's either playing behind your tanks, but in front of your supports and down low to make sure that you can get your healing and you're not out of view of your supports. And you should be trying to land as many cleave shots as you can. So what I mean by that is you have to hit as many targets as you can. That really adds up your damage very, very quickly. It makes it very hard for the enemy healers to heal properly, because they have to keep spreading out their heals between many targets. And it also provides a valuable source of pressure on the back line as well. Since they can't really hide behind their tanks anymore, they're forced to use natural cover or shields, and the healers will have to pick up slack in healing each other, which will distract them. It will open opportunities for your flankers to move in and attack them. Sometimes they'll end up healing each other, so the tanks will become exposed. So you have to pay attention to who they're healing, and what you should do based on that. And then, so that's the first type of play style, where you'll probably be spending most of your time like this, just playing with your tanks, making sure you try to hit as many cleave shots as you can by lining them up. But then, when you're not in that situation, or it's not really viable for whatever reason, then another great play style I love to use is just flanking very high, out of sight, over chokes. So what I mean by that is, say there's an enemy who's coming from this spawn room over here, and they're moving up these stairs, right? If I position myself all the way up against this wall here, as they walk through the choke, they will not see you. Like, they will not see you at all unless they look up, but that'll expose them to the rest of the rest of your team that's awaiting them over here, right? So once they walk through the choke, you can drop in on their back line. You can activate your E. You can just explode them as fast as you can. And then usually by that point, you'll have done a serious amount of damage to their entire team because you can get their whole team in the aura pretty easily by doing this strategy. And that's a great way to engage a team fight as long as your team is there to follow up. I mean, don't suicide in if it's completely 1v6. Make sure that your team is on board with what you're doing, and not that you're just jumping the whole team by yourself. But usually if you can manage to take out even one or maybe both healers, like that fight is just an instant win for you. Now, another thing you have to make sure you do is monitor enemy ultimates at all times, especially support ultimates. You have to think about when you want to use your ultimate to counter theirs, right? Or more like you have to keep track of theirs so they can't counter yours. So what I mean by that is there are many ultimates in this game, say like Luna, Mantis, now Invisible Woman as well, who all out-heal your ultimate's damage. So they all heal for more than 150 per second, so you won't be able to kill anyone through them. Cloak and Dagger as well satisfies this. So just be aware, keep track of their ults. We'll talk a little bit about that later too when we talk about each hero. All right. So I think let's just hop into talking about each hero now. I think we're going to talk about strategists first since we were already kind of talking about this. We'll just go one by one through what I think is the order of the hardest strategist to play against to the easiest strategist to play against. I will throw Invisible Woman in there where I think she belongs, but we'll see what happens over time since we don't really have much experience playing against her yet. So first off, Mantis. Mantis, huge threat. She does a ton of damage. She can damage boost herself as well. She moves very quickly, though she will move a little bit slower in Season 1. Her move speed is now down another meter a second. Her passive was a little bit overtuned before, so they've nerfed that a little bit, which should make her a little bit easier to kill. But still, she does a ton of damage. She can damage boost her teammates. She heals herself quite a bit. If she manages to land headshots, too, she can constantly keep her team up. Her ultimate is similar to Luna's in that she can just pop it. Her entire team around her basically becomes invincible. There's nothing really you can do to them at that point. So make sure, if you can, try to ban Mantis if you are Diamond or above. I mean, really just try to ban any supports you can because most of them are like the biggest threats to you. Except for a couple duelists, which we will talk about later. All right, now let's talk about Luna. So Luna, let's just limit this to strategists here to make this easier for us. So Luna's very vulnerable, in my experience, to flanks, especially now with the new patch. You do enough damage to kill her with just your E and 3 attacks and then 2 zaps. That's it. You don't even have to use your right click at all, which is kind of crazy. But normally, you don't even need to amp it anymore if you do want to kill her very quickly. You can just hit 3 attacks and a right click, and she dies. And you can do that from even farther than the range of your aura as well. So I feel like if she doesn't have her ultimate, Luna isn't too bad to play against as long as she doesn't land her freeze on you, which could be an insta-kill, which is also another threat that Mantis has against you as well. But it's a lot harder for Mantis to land the sleep against a flying storm than it is for Luna to land her simple line projectile freeze. So keep that in mind. She does pump a lot of damage into her tanks, but she doesn't have great self-healing capabilities, right? So if you're constantly hitting Luna through her own tanks, it's going to provide constant pressure that the other healer will have to pick up. Now, her ultimate. Let's talk about her ultimate. I wish that this one had got nerfed a little bit because, in my opinion, it's still very overtuned. She gets banned a lot in Grandmaster Plus. So she basically becomes invulnerable for 12 seconds, and her whole team will not take any damage. There's nothing really you can do about it. You just got to wait it out. Now, there's 2 things that you can do when you use your ult, right? You can either use it between times when they've used their support ultimates, and that's granted that your team survives a team fight when they use it and you don't use yours to counter it. But if they don't have any support ultimates, a lot of the times I end up just singling out the Luna and solo ulting her as she tries to run away, and then moving back to my team once she dies. Especially with the extra bonus health, I think that's even more of a viable strategy before, even if you have to put yourself in the enemy backline to do it. I still think if you're able to knock down their strongest healer, then, you basically just win that fight. And it's the same thing with Mantis. She will attempt to run away and separate herself from her teammates if she doesn't have her ultimate. But then, in that situation, if they back away too far, you can just you know, hit your ultimate on the rest of the team that's all grouped up on the front line. And that way, you might be able to take down multiple targets and the healer will be too far to help. So either way, pick your poison. Your ultimate is basically just a team-winning machine. Yeah, so make sure you use advantage of it and only use it at times that you really need to. Now, sometimes, especially if you're on, like, defense, or if you're on attack, I mean, the enemies will constantly hold their support ults. And if they do that, if they never pop them, if you can't manage to provide enough pressure to force them to pop them early, then sometimes it's best to just use your ultimate, get it over with, just to save yourself some time so you can get that ultimate out of the way. And who knows, sometimes maybe you will catch somebody who's a little out of position and can't make it into the Luna or Mantis ultimate in time. All right, now let's talk about Invisible Woman. So this is kind of theory right now, just because she hasn't really been battle tested and ranked yet. But I think, personally, Invisible Woman is going to be exceptionally strong, and I think she's going to be very, very annoying to play against Storm as well. So Storm obviously does cleave damage, Invisible Woman does cleave heals. So your damage will basically be nullified against everyone except for her. But she also has a shield she can throw down in front of her teammates. So that can block all of your shots as well. So that's going to be pretty annoying. She also has her E ability, which pulls people out of the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and show what that looks like. So when she uses it, if she right-clicks after, she can grab you forward. So what that... I feel like that's going to be very scary as Storm, because you can fly around and your positioning matters a lot. You still don't move too fast, and especially because this is such a wide angle. Like, you don't need to be right on them when they use it. She can just pull you out of the sky, basically, and just pull you out of position. And if her team focuses you after that, it's going to be a good night. So, not going to be good. And if she pulls you down into her shift as well, that'll just keep on pulling you down. And it's kind of a death sentence. Also, her ultimate is very similar to Luna and Mantis in the fact that it does 165 heals a second, and your ultimate does 150, so it does out-heal your ultimate, unfortunately. Even though you would... It's about the same size as your ultimate. I mean, it's a lot bigger, but you'll be able to hit people who are inside of it, but the problem is there won't be able to be much follow-up because they're just going to be getting healed constantly the whole time, so I would probably recommend to hold on to your ultimate until after that zone collapses. I think it's pretty easy to counter after, as long as you can manage for your team to survive those 8 seconds that their whole team is invisible. Then you can probably get your ultimate ready and then pop it right down into the middle as soon as the zone ends, and you'll be sure to get some kills unless they have a second support ultimate waiting. All right, so that is Invisible Woman. Let's talk about Loki now. So Loki, he can also be pretty annoying to play against. So Loki, as you probably know, can throw multiple clones of himself all over the place. He can teleport between them. He can turn invisible and heal himself out of combat. So he's pretty hard to track down. He also has these basically invincibility lamps, I like to call them, where during those like 6 seconds that he puts them down, you cannot damage anybody inside of them. Really, you have to destroy the lamps first. So those can be pretty frustrating. He's pretty hard to track down and kill. And he's also a huge threat because if there's any other supports on the field that have ultimates that could nullify your ultimate, he can just copy them with his ult and, you know, nullify your ult. And that's no good. Another big risk about Loki, especially on the enemy team, is that he can steal your ultimate. So Storm's ultimate is incredibly, incredibly strong. And Lokis love playing with Storms because they get to just steal the Storm ult and get a bunch of kills for themselves. So watch out for that. But one thing to keep in mind that I think Storm actually is very good at is a lot of times Lokis keep at least one clone of themselves pretty close to the tanks, or even like in the back line, just so they can get more consistent heals on the front line. But you can get cleave shots off on those clones pretty easily. So especially if they're like all lined up like this and there's like tanks and there's a clone behind them, you can just constantly be damaging the clone as well with your cleave shots, just to annoy the Loki and reduce his healing output. So try to keep the clones to a minimum if you can. Keep trying to hit them as much damage as you can, especially with the damage buffs to Storm. I feel like you'll be able to take out clones a lot faster than you could in Season 0, but that was one of her strengths against Loki before. Try to keep track of his swap cooldown too. If he does use it, if you hear that snap, I think it goes on about a 15-second cooldown, so you will have time to track him down after he uses it. Another thing to consider against invisible characters as Storm This will be especially noticeable, I guess, inside of Invisible Woman's ult, or with Invisible Woman as well. So far, when you pop your E here, your lightning bolts do not hit anybody if they are invisible. You have to be able to see them first. So Invisible Psylocke, Invisible Loki, Invisible Woman, they will all not get hit by your E unless you see them. So if you do hear footsteps around you and you don't see anybody, just start throwing out some random shots. If you manage to hit them, they will become visible, and that's when you can activate it and they'll start taking that extra damage. So make sure you keep your ears locked in, listening for those invisible people, and you should be okay. All right, let's talk about Cloak and Dagger now. So Cloak and Dagger also received a buff this season in that her ult now moves 4 times rather than 3. So what I mean by that, she lays down a path of shadow here. They can stack multiple times, but even standing in one path here is enough to nullify your ult. So make sure that if enemies are standing in this, don't try to ult them. It's not really going to do anything unless your teammates are there to help focus people down, or if they're like rooted in place somehow. So just keep in mind. It's also very easy for her to hit her E, her Veil of Darkness on you. That'll increase the damage you take while you're in the air as well, and you'll be blinded so you can't see where you're going or where the enemies are. So just be aware of that as well, since that can be kind of annoying. And if she throws down her heal zone here, it's pretty hard to damage through unless you have your amplified thunder already going. That'll help nullify it a little bit, but it's still kind of hard to kill her through. You still can get enough damage per second, even solo, to kill through it. It's just tough. If she's constantly moving around, she's pretty skinny. It will be pretty hard to kill her. All right. Let's talk about Adam Warlock next. Actually, also, wait, there's one more thing about Dagger I wanted to talk about. So when they switch into Cloak form, if you switch to Cloak form, they're also really, really good at damaging you because they don't need to aim perfectly. There's a little bit of lock on here, as you can see. So it's very consistent damage against you. Again, predictable, but still, you can't like dodge as easily as you can versus many of the other characters in the games that use projectiles or hit scan. It's the same thing with Scarlet Witch, but we'll discuss that later as well. And then when she uses her secondary fire here, she will turn invisible and be able to fly a little bit. So just beware that even if she doesn't have her ultimate to cancel out the ult, that Dagger is very, very hard to kill because she can just turn her and her teammates invincible for a moment and move around quickly. So another quick tip, if you pay very close attention, you can see the dark circle around Cloak on the other team, so you can actually tell where they're going. If you did just pop your ultimate and they use that ability and they're trying to get away, make sure you keep track of where she is by paying attention to that aura. You might be able to track her down, make sure she dies at least, if not some of her teammates. All right, let's talk about Adam Warlock. So Adam Warlock, I think Adam is actually another huge threat to Storm. So he does a lot of damage, right? He can do a considerable amount of damage, especially on headshots, body shots. He's not quite hit scan, but he might as well be because his projectiles move so fast. If he hits a big secondary fire on you, it can take you down very, very quickly. He's also probably the hardest healer to like gank and kill immediately. So if you're trying to sneak up on him and hit him from behind, he can just throw down his E on himself. He'll just heal up fully. He can life bond himself. He can soul bond himself to other teammates. So if you are doing too much single target damage to him, it can spread it out. So make sure if he does soul bond, it won't be doing much against your amplified thunder, because what soul bond does is it spreads the damage out that's done to anybody that's linked to everybody else that's linked. So if you're doing damage to everybody, if you're continuing to hit your cleave shots, if you're continuing to pop your aura and land those lightning strikes on everybody that is soul bonded, then they're all going to be still taking the same amount of damage, right? So make sure if he does pop that you're trying to still continue to hit as many people as possible. And make sure if you use your ultimate against him that you're not just singling him out while other people are soul bonded to him. It's very hard to take him down. So basically, try to avoid him if you can. Try to target the other support. The only reason that I list him as not quite as hard to play against as the other heroes is because his ultimate is not quite as good against Storm. Especially if he uses it, you can hear exactly where he is. You can get out over there pretty quick with Tornado. You can pop your E to zap him. And then they all only start with 100 HP, so you should be able to burst them down pretty quickly. sometimes if your teammates would have got a wipe already and you do have your ultimate and he's about to activate his, then you can track him down. You can ult on top of them. They're all gonna be grouped where they got revived. So, but he can be pretty frustrating to play against, especially with his team ups with Mantis and Starlord specifically, who are both very good heroes against Storm, and he makes them a lot more annoying to deal with. So, still don't like seeing him on the enemy team, but it's not really a problem with him himself. It's more of a problem with Mantis and Starlord that he teams up with, since if you don't know, the team up with Adam Warlock and Mantis and Starlord is that Mantis and Starlord get cocoons, just like Adam does. When they die once every 100 seconds, they can cocoon to just revive themselves on the spot. Which also can be very annoying, because another thing you have to think about very carefully is just when to pop your E, right? So it does have a decently long cooldown. Let me turn off the cooldown, or turn on cooldowns here. So when you use it, it lasts for 8 seconds, but as soon as it expires, it will go on cooldown for another 15. So really, you only have an uptime of like 1/3 in boosted form. And between those fights, you should just be focusing on poking if you can from a distance. Try not to get too close if you don't need to, because that is the primary source of your damage. Between the damage amp up and the lightning strikes, you're going to need that in every fight possible. I'm going to discuss that a little bit later when we talk about flankers and flyers, but that is Adam Warlock. Okay, let's talk about Rocket a little bit. So Rocket, he is mobile, but not too mobile for Storm. She can keep up with him pretty easily because she doesn't have to go in melee range or anything, and especially with the increased projectile speed against him now, even if he's dashing around and wall climbing, you should not have too much of an issue hitting him with your projectiles, and your right click is hit scan, so you shouldn't have too much of a problem finishing him off with that. The only real problem with him is that it does make it kind of a grind. He is very good at AoE healing, just like Invisible Woman will be here. And that if you hit multiple cleave shots on tanks and DPS, he can just keep pumping out heals on them, and it'll pretty much nullify all of your damage. Something else to consider, pick potential is a lot lower because he has the revive station here. So what you should be doing, you should be trying to track that down if you can, and killing that before trying to go in to get a pick. Because if you do get a pick while using your amped up E, and then it expires, and then that person respawns, you're down your ability, they're back at full strength, and it's not good for your team. You're not really going to have an easy time fighting against that person. They're going to target you. They're going to know where you are. And that's your biggest strength as Storm, is trying to be undetectable, trying to move around silently if you can. And if they know where you are, know what you're up to, they will come and hunt you. So just be aware of the revive station if you can. His gun doesn't provide too much of a threat since you can be constantly moving around. Unless you get too close to him, in which case he can melt you, but a lot of rockets don't really even try to use his primary fire yet. I think it's kind of underrated, though. I think Rocket's gun is actually very, very strong if you use it close up when you're getting dove. But overall, pretty easy to play against. I would say when Rocket pops his ultimate as well, it amplifies his team's damage, so especially if you're in a vulnerable position, I think you should basically just hide and wait this one out if possible. It's not really worth taking a team fight during this unless you're already up a number of men, so just something to consider there. It does have a ton of health too. I'd recommend killing it. If your whole team wants to work on killing it together, then you can help out with that, but usually you don't really want to spend time doing that because it has way too much health and you do not have enough single target damage to actually kill it in time. So probably just let it run out. All right, Jeff. Jeff is very easy to play against the Storm. He can climb walls and stuff, but your projectiles are quite wide, actually. So usually with hit scan heroes, you have just this small fin that you can hit, right? It's a very, very small hitbox, so as hit scan, you're not really good against them, but the projectiles are actually spheres, so they can interact with this much more easily. So you can hit him with almost every shot without even trying. So that kind of nullifies him. He's quite easy to kill, actually. And of course, his ultimate, now that the height of it got nerfed, it's now, just like a 5-meter tall cylinder. You can easily outfly it, so you don't even have to worry about flying that high to avoid it. You're also great at killing him if he's eaten a bunch of your teammates. Your aura will continue to hit him if it's amped up. Your projectile is very easy to hit. Your bolt is also very easy to hit since it's also a 1-meter cylinder. So it's not just hit scan, so you don't have to hit the fin directly. You can just hit anywhere around it, and it will still do a considerable amount of damage to him. You can take him down real quick. It's also kind of hard for him to hit you because he has like the delay to his shots, and they move kind of slow, so he's not really going to be shooting at you very much. The only problem is he does heal quite a bit on his team, but honestly, if you can cleave over to him, he doesn't really have any great way to heal other than bubbling himself, but if he uses too many bubbles, he'll run out of them pretty quick. Yeah, all right. Jeff is definitely the easiest support to play against as Storm. Probably in general, I think Jeff is still a little bit underpowered. But, all right. So that is Strategists. Let's talk about Duelists a little bit. Also, something to consider here while I'm going through in this order. You should pretty much always be targeting the squishies first. So target supports first if you can. If not, if they're too safe or if they're healing each other too much, you can target the DPS and try to burst them down. Pretty much don't target tanks first unless they start to take a ton of damage, in which case you can finish them off with your right click or amp up your damage for your team so you can burn through them very quickly. That is a viable approach depending on what tanks you have. If you do have a strong front line, it's easy to roll them over if you just amp up your damage and continue walking forward. But other than that, you should mostly be targeting the squishies in the back with your cleave shots or flanking on them. All right, so let's talk about Duelists. So I'm going to break this up into a few categories first, since it'll kind of change the way that I talk about the play styles. So first off, we have shooters, and then we're going to talk about brawlers, and then we're going to talk about flankers and flyers, and then we're going to talk about spammers finally. All right, so we're going to talk about shooters first. Now, these are your hit scan heroes, or heroes that are a threat from very long distances. So first off, we're going to talk about Black Widow. So obviously, she does not have damage fall off on her scoped right click here. So I think a good Widow could be a big threat. She's not played very much now. She might be in Season 1 now that she got a little bit of a buff to her shift. Now that she recovers stamina much more quickly, she's more mobile, so she can move around faster. She can get away from you faster since she can run very fast. But I don't think she's too much of a threat still. I think she's still very squishy. It's probably easier to hit her with your projectiles than it is for her to hit you when you're moving back and forth very, very quickly in tornado mode. Honestly, like hitting someone like this is very hard. Actually, I'm just going to show this off now. So we're going to move back down to the other area of the practice range here. We're going to change some parameters here. So we're going to put some Storm bots up here just to show what it looks like to play against Storm, since it's a good way of thinking about it. Where is she? There she is. There's like no order in particular for some reason. All right, we're just gonna set them up at like 40 meters, let's say, just random. We're gonna make them move randomly, super fast, and apply that. We're gonna swap over to Black Widow. I'm gonna give this a try. So this is what it looks like. You'll probably be fighting around these distances against her normally unless you're able to get a flank off, but like it is very hard to hit Storm when she's moving like this. And honestly, the computers move a little bit more predictably than even I would or any other Storm player would, since they'll be descending and ascending and moving in more close-knit circles, so they're not moving like long distances as often as these guys are. But they are honestly very hard to hit. Like, you'd think that hit scan heroes are the best counter to flyers in this game, but oftentimes I feel like that's not quite the case. Projectiles tend to be wider and they're kind of easier to hit against flyers than you might think, unless the hit scan player is very, very good. So just keep an eye out. But usually I don't think Black Widow is going to be too much of a threat because of this. Now let's talk about what I think is probably the biggest counter of all to Storm. So I know Hawkeye just got a nerf, but the problem playing against Hawkeye was never the fact that, you know, he charged too fast or whatever. It's the fact that you never know when you're going to die, right? I feel like with every other hit scan, like shooter here, they're pretty easy to understand, to know what they're capable of at any given time. But if you're ever able to see Hawkeye, he might kill you at any moment. And that's the biggest threat. That's why I think Hawkeye is the #1 ban if you're trying to play Storm. #1 ban for many people. I think having him in the game is just kind of a mistake. I don't think he should be able to one-shot, since he'll probably always be banned just because of that capability. He kind of just like runs the game. If Hawkeye's not banned, there's one on each side. The better one always wins, pretty much. But watch out for that. If he pops his ultimate, just leave. Just hide for the entire duration. He will kill you because ghosts of you will just stay static. And honestly, your biggest strength is constantly moving. So if he's able to shoot a stationary target and deal damage to you, it's not going to be very good. Your best bet against him, if you do have to play against him for some reason, though I would recommend not doing that, is to come try to flank in very high over top of him, like I discussed before. Because a lot of the times, with the third-person camera here, you don't realize that you can't really see very high vertically, right? So even if, let's get these storms in here again, just for demonstration purposes. So these guys are only 20 meters away, and they're like all over me right here. But even if they're not that high, like I still can't see them when I'm right here, and they're just like right on top of me. So you can come in at this angle, even be this close to the ground, just get him within the range of your aura, bam, he'll die. Like it's that simple. If you manage to get the flank, just be aware. If he does seem to be looking around a lot more, be aware of that, and I don't know, maybe swap or just play with your tanks more often. But he is very, very risky to play against, and I'd rather not. All right, let's talk about Hela a little bit. So Hela's pretty similar, but her damage is a little more expected now. But now that she got nerfed, actually, in Season 1, she's down to 250 health from 275, so she's going to be even easier to duel. Honestly, I think Hela is kind of overrated as a counter to Storm. I think, in my experience, it hasn't been too hard to hit her since I feel like her hitbox is relatively large. She only has the one movement ability, and it's easily readable to see where she goes. So you can hit her with some burst pretty easily. Her E is not going to be able to really stun you at all since it's such a slow projectile in the air. So her only threat really is just like cracked aim. But if you constantly peek in and out of cover, she can't insta-kill you. She'll no longer be able to hit one to the head and one to the body to kill you anymore either. Since her damage got a little bit reduced. So I don't think Hela's too strong against Storm now personally. I know that's going to be a very unpopular opinion. But even when she uses her ultimate, she flies up in the air. She's looking down most of the time at targets that are down there. So if you can fly up to the sides here, she won't notice you. You're also kind of hard to hit out of the air if you move randomly, if she does try to hit you, and her ultimate doesn't last for too long. So it's not that much of a threat to you normally. So much more of a threat to your allies on the ground. So what she should be doing when she uses her ultimate is moving over to speed boost mode, trying to speed your teammates around to keep them moving if there isn't cover, or try to get them to cover as fast as possible. All right, let's talk Punisher. So Punisher. First off, when you play against a Punisher, the first thing you're going to see almost every round is the man on a turret, right? You're going to see him on the turret. It only has 600 health, and you can do pretty decent damage from pretty far away, just quickly peeking. So you don't really want to play around the turret too much because it makes your team, it makes your tanks have a hard time pushing up, basically. So you want to help take down that turret as fast as possible, just for your tank's sake. Not really too much for yours. I wish that Storm's cleave shots actually went through the turret and hit Punisher, but sadly they don't. But try to take down the turret as fast as you can, just for your team's sake, so you can continue pushing forward. Other than that, he is very slow moving. He is very wide. You can kill him very quickly. His damage is consistent. Even if it's high, it's consistent, so you know what to expect. Just peek in and out of cover like you would with any other hit scan hero. Just play around the walls like this, poke them down as much as possible, or of course, if you can flank them, go for that. A lot of the times, once a Punisher uses his ult, he'll start looking for the biggest targets to hit, like the tanks and stuff like that. So when he pops it, and you hear this, you can burst him down pretty easily most of the time, because he moves very slow, so you can pretty much guarantee hit all of your projectiles, no problem. If you manage to be up to his side or behind him at this time, you can probably kill him before he can even turn around, look up, find you, and kill you. You'll be able to do a lot of damage to this guy very, very quickly. So I don't think he's too much of a threat either, actually. I don't think that the biggest counters to Storm are hit scan. I think the biggest counters are Hawkeye and Winter Soldier here. So we're going to talk about Winter Soldier. So Winter Soldier is unique because he has a few things that really, really damage Storm, right? So first off, when you're playing with your team and you're playing behind your team, if he hits a hook on somebody, it will grab you as well if you're next to your tank. So just be aware, even if he's using his hook and you're kind of behind cover, if you're near your tank and they get grabbed, you'll get pulled in and you're going to be the one to die. Your tank's probably going to survive though. But he can also pull you out of the sky, so just keep track of that 8-second cooldown. Make sure that if he is charging it up, because he does have to charge it up for a moment before he'll be able to reach you. So if he does start charging it up, start moving around randomly, try to move for cover if you can. But also keep in mind that he has his E ability as well here. What was that one called? Tainted Voltage. This one knocks you straight out of the sky. If he manages to hit you, if I could manage to hit one of these storms, let me just... I'm very bad with Winter Soldier. But it knocks you completely out of the sky until you hit the ground. And that makes you very, very predictable, right? He'll knock you out of the sky, he can pull you, and then he can just combo you and you die. So be aware of that. Also, his shots, I didn't even mention this, but his primary fire also explode. If they hit your tanks, they'll damage you right behind them too, so just be aware. Don't play too close to your tanks when there's a Winter Soldier on the other team, because you don't want to get pulled, you don't want to get exploded with his projectiles. Other than that, like, he doesn't have the easiest time shooting you out of the sky, but he does do a lot of damage, so just watch out. He can burst you down randomly too, just like Hawkeye can. So I think Winter Soldier is a huge threat. Except for his ultimate, you can help counter his ultimate pretty well. Like, he won't be able to reach you even if you're like 10 meters in the air, so just take to the skies when you hear that. If he starts speaking again, you can just speed boost your team out of there, make sure that he doesn't get that reset. But I do think that Winter Soldiers, especially a good Winter Soldier, is one of the hardest heroes to play against as Storm. You'll get picked a lot if he's really good. So just watch out for that, especially if he's aware. Like, if you're trying to hide at like the top of this choke as he's coming through with the rest of his team, all it takes is him going like this and then pop, grabs you, you die. Like, that's it. Well, with other heroes, they won't be able to just stun lock you immediately from up there like he can. I mean, he has multiple abilities that can do it. So he's always a huge threat. You should always try to keep your distance from him if you can, or burst him down very quickly between his cooldowns if you have the possibility to. All right. Now we're going to talk about Brawlers a little bit. So Brawlers are usually a little bit easier to deal with. For you at least, maybe not for your team. They're the ones that are going to be diving your team a lot, so you're going to have to be providing support for your backline and killing them as they dive your supports. So make sure you're thinking about their cooldowns a lot. So here, we're going to talk about Black Panther. So the way that Black Panther works, if you didn't know, is his right click, so his spear throw and his E, his dash here, will put marks on people that will basically allow him to reset his shift if he hits that target, and it will consume that mark. So what his gameplay looks like then is when you spawn someone, let's just go back outside to some dummies so I can just show you what this looks like. And I'll turn off this so you can see that it resets. He's going to throw a spear, he's going to dash through, he's going to throw another spear, he's going to dash through. Like, he's going to keep dashing through your team multiple times. So always expect him to dash again between the target that he's going for. So that way you know which side he's going to be on. So what you should be doing as Storm, if he's constantly dashing between your teammates like that, pay attention to when he throws his spear. He's going to dash through, try to hit him on that side once, and then when he dashes through, hit him on that side again. Or hit him with a right click as soon as he dashes as well. Either way works. Just hit him with something every dash, and you can do a lot of consistent damage to him. Try to catch him before he gets onto your supports too. So a lot of the times he's going to be going for a flank, looking for a route to get that first spear throw on and get inside of his dash range. So if you can try to meet him over there, he's going to have a very hard time dueling you because you're not easy to put your stacks on. So he's not easy to get resets on you. Either he has to direct hit you with one of his spears, which can be pretty difficult if you're moving around very fast, or he has to fly up in the air using his E to like kick you and put the stack on you, and then he can get some resets. But either way, it's very hard for him to deal enough damage to kill you. So even if you stay pretty high off the ground, if you stay like up here, like his dash won't even reach you. It only goes like 15 meters or so. So if your aura is no longer on the ground, you're too high for him to hit you. And you can basically do free damage to him. So try to burst him down as fast as you can. He's going to have less bonus health now in Season 1 as well, since that was kind of a problem playing against him before, was that the more resets he gets, the more health he's going to get. And he's just going to keep becoming like impossible to kill. But your E specifically, your amped lightning damage is amazing against him because you don't have to aim it. It's just going to do very consistent damage as long as you stay basically on top of your supports, because if he's dashing back and forth through them, then he's going to be on that side, he's going to dash through on this side, he's still going to be within the range of your aura. And he doesn't have iframes during his dash or his E or anything, so he's going to take damage from every tick of this lightning, and it's just going to whittle him down. If you can manage to hit a couple shots, if some of your supports can even hit him a little bit, then he should be no problem to take down, as long as your team doesn't fall into disarray or if he just bursts them down too quickly. But I think overall, you're a great counter to these types of characters, so Black Panther is pretty vulnerable to you. Iron Fist, very, very similar situation. Let's talk about Iron Fist for a second. So Iron Fist will basically just lock on to your supports. He could chase you too, but you can speed boost away if you want to keep away from him. You do a decent amount of damage, and if you can get even a little bit of heals, I feel like Iron Fist in general is just kind of a low tier character in Grandmaster and Plus right now. So if you get a little bit of heals, he won't really be able to kill you. It's also hard for him to hit all of his attacks on you since you can fly around faster and he can like keep up. So he'll miss a few attacks here and there. He'll have to use his abilities to keep up with you and overcommit. The lightning strikes again will hit him every time when he's around you, because once he's in, he's like all in. So, you know, like Black Panther might be kind of difficult to deal with sometimes, just because he can dash in and then he can get back out. So if you pop your E prematurely and then he comes back in within those 15 seconds cooldown, like it's going to be a problem since you won't have that consistent damage anymore. While with Iron Fist, like once he's in, he's pretty much in. He doesn't really go in and out quite as much. He's usually easier to deal with for that reason. All right, let's keep talking about these brawlers here. So we got Magik next. So Magik is pretty much locked onto the ground. Like her shifts can't go up, so she won't be able to reach you very high with that. Her only upward mobility or damage that she can do upward is either her slice like this and her dash. So if she manages to connect a slice and a dash and then attack you, you'll die instantly, right? But if she's charging up her right click, just be aware, start dodging around as much as possible. If she does hit it, continue dodging as much as possible. If she tries to use her dash on you, I think usually what's best to do is move to your right side. So the way that Magik's dash work, and because of the third-person camera, it means that usually she's better off aiming to the right because, again, just like lining up the shots with Storm here, her travel path actually goes like to where the crosshair is. So if she puts it like behind you, then she'll actually go up that way and hit you directly. But if she aims right at you, it's a little easier to move out of the way. So actually what you want to do is move left. So if she's dashing at you this way and you move to this side, it's going to be more likely that she misses you. So you're going to want to move to the left as she dashes. It's going to make her E a lot harder to hit on you. But if she does hit that right click on you and then hit the dash and the melee is like, she will kill you. So just watch out. All she has to do is this. Oh, I missed the melee, but you get what I was trying to say. I'm not very good with Magik. But that's all she has to do. She doesn't even have to do the quick melee, but if she does, like, it'll just guarantee. But otherwise, again, she'll stay around her team, around your team. Sometimes it can be annoying because she has the iframes from her shift that might cancel out some of your damage or cancel out one of your lightning strikes. But usually if she goes in, she pretty much stays in until the fight is over. It's pretty hard for her to get in and out since she only has the one form of long mobility. Otherwise, it's just her shift. So make sure you just pop your E, zap her as much as you can. If she's diving your supports, you can usually hit her because she has a pretty large hitbox as well. So that shouldn't be too bad. All right, now we're going to talk about Mr. Fantastic. So I think Mr. Fantastic is actually going to be the hardest of the brawlers to play against. He's kind of halfway between like a brawler and a Vanguard, since he also has like 350 health now, like Wolverine will have in Season 1. The one thing that I'm worried about with him really is not really his attacks. They can be a little long range, but he can swing them around, so he can actually do some consistent damage to you, I think. But I'm more worried about the right click. So if he right clicks you and then either dashes to you to launch himself up in the air, he can do like pretty considerable damage to you. He can also entangle enemies with his right click and then throw you at another person. So that can do a lot of damage to you too, since you don't really want to be right next to your teammates. Otherwise, you'll probably take a lot of damage that was meant for them too. And then he also, yeah, just pulling himself to you can be a huge threat. He can also, if he hits his right click on you and then hits his primary fire, he can pull you towards him. So if he manages to hit you out of the sky with the right click and then pull you down, that'll be a huge threat. Similarly to Invisible Woman, actually, since she also has a form of a pull. I think pulls are probably very, very dangerous. As I said with Winter Soldier, they make it very hard to play against because he can just grab you out of position, and if you're out of position as Storm, you just die. So just keep in mind the cooldown on his right click if you can. It is kind of hard for him to hit it, I think, and the range isn't too long, but just something to keep in mind. His ult really isn't too much of a threat to you, again, since it only hits really on the ground in a sphere, I believe. So just stay up in the air and he won't really be able to hit you with it. But he does have a lot of health, so I think you should be targeting other people first if possible.
We've been discovered.
All right. Time for Wolverine. Wolverine, not much of a threat to Storm. He's pretty ground-based. He can only dash so high. If he manages to hit his shift on you, honestly, he deserves the kill because that's crazy. It's pretty hard to land. Though I think they did make it a little more consistent in Season 1, but still, he would have to fly through the air. You can just kind of dodge around. He has a pretty wide hitbox, pretty thick guy, so you can hit him with your projectiles pretty easily. Just make sure that you provide support to your tanks. If they do get grabbed, make sure you can switch over to speed mode to get them out as fast as possible, or switch to damage mode and use that as a time to engage. Depending on the situation, like if he's caught too far out, try to speed him back. If it does look like your team could engage on it, try to get your tanks to move up, apply some pressure, and then pop your E to zap all the teammates who are trying to kill your tank, or all of Wolverine's teammates who are trying to kill your tank. His ult isn't too much of a threat either. The only thing that I would consider a little bit of a threat is if he does fly up in the air with it. Let me see if I can replicate this right now. I might not, but if he can fly up in the air and then take you down with him, so I didn't really do it there, but sometimes that does happen. He can fly up in the air and just like take you down to the ground and slam you. You'll just die, but just try to stay away from him if you can. He's not really going to try to target you with his ult. He's going to be targeting your tanks most of the time, so you can do consistent damage to him if he's bothering your tanks. You can also, a lot of the time, he's going to be like hiding on flanks, looking for a route to just dash in quickly and steal one of your tanks. So make sure you keep an eye on like where he is. Keep an eye on those flanks. Make sure that you try to poke him if you can. Try to get his passive out of the way. If you know that his passive is down, make sure you try to burst him as fast as possible to get that kill. Otherwise, he's just gonna get another health bar, and that's no fun. But he's also probably one of the easiest to play against. All right. So that is the last of what I would consider the brawlers here. So now we're going to move into the flankers and flyers category. So we're going to talk a little bit about Iron Man. So Iron Man, this is a pretty even duel between the two, I think. So he does do a lot of damage with his beam. It does hit scan damage, which, as I said before, is actually harder than you might think to hit against Storm, especially when they're moving randomly. They're moving like up and down. But if he has really good tracking aim, then he's still going to be able to do a lot of damage to you. But the problem is he also only has 250 health, and you can burst him down just as fast as he can burst you down. So if you're... It's actually pretty similar, like, honestly, to Storm here, except Storm moves a little bit faster. But just for explanation, like, you can just hit him with a couple of these. The lightning will constantly help, too. So if you can manage to stay high and flank him, if he doesn't know that you're there and you can get within your aura range and you can pop it like this, like, you'll be able to duel him almost every time. But the problem is if you come directly, like, at range to him, or if you don't have support from one of your healers, then, I don't know, it's kind of a skill matchup. So I don't think he's necessarily strong or weak against Storm. His ultimate, again, not that great against Storm because you can just stay off the ground. So it won't, unless he direct air to airs you, in which case, again, he deserves it. Then, you know, he's not too much of a threat except for his beam. The one thing that I would be wary about, though, is his team up with Bruce Banner. When he powers up that gamma ray, it does a lot more damage against you. So just be aware if he is teamed up with Bruce Banner. I'd recommend probably not playing Storm, especially because Hulk has so much health himself too, and you're not great at single target damage that he'll be a lot harder to deal with. And Iron Man can just burn down your supports too fast. Even if Iron Man manages to flank and beam down one of your supports, if you kill him, you're still kind of down in that fight, since the healer is probably the most important members of your team. The longer the fight goes, the more likely you are to lose it. So if he does manage to kill one of your healers and you kill him, make sure that you start pushing pressure as fast as possible, because the longer the fight goes, the more likely you are to lose. But yeah, that's Iron Man. He's not too much of a threat unless you get too close to him. Let's talk about Psylocke. All right. So Psylocke is pretty scary against Storm. So especially if you're alternating between those two play styles of playing with your tanks, getting cleave shots, and then going for flanks and trying to pick off their back line, Psylocke can be pretty scary because she'll show up when you least expect it. She can just go invisible and she'll just pop you. Like, she'll kill you very, very quickly. She gets a little extra bonus health if she hits her right click on you as well. She can dash around to get out of range of some of your abilities as well. So just keep in mind, if she gets too close to you, you're pretty much dead. So try to keep track of where she is at all times. Her invisibility doesn't last for too long. It's only 4 seconds. So be aware of when she might be using it, when she might be pushing in, and try not to engage from anything far or from anything closer than like within your aura range. Honestly, you want to hit her from a little farther from aura range, because her shotgun approach here with her projectiles really does a ton of damage against you. It's very consistent, so watch out for that. Her ultimate does reach pretty high in the sky too when she uses it. Like, let's just show here, for example. So make sure if they do have Psylocke ultimate that you're not staying, that you're either very, very high up in the air or you stay on the ground to get your support ultimates. Make sure that you stay in range of your allied support ultimates, basically. But Psylocke can be pretty scary, but you just have to manage her positioning. Then otherwise, she's not too bad. All right, Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch can be a little bit scary just because she does consistent damage against you, and also since she received, I think this is a buff actually in Season 1. She used to do more % health damage, so she would be more of a tank buster before. But now she does a little more damage per second by default. I think 60 up from 50 plus a certain, like 3% health damage or something like that. So her damage, just like Cloak, is very, very consistent. She can also fly up in the air, makes her a little bit harder to hit with your projectiles, since she can move around a little bit. But her ultimate, again, she's super vulnerable, so she's not really played too much at higher ranks, because if she uses it, she pretty much dies. Her E, also not too much of a threat, but she can, if they're really good, they can throw it up in the air and they can detonate it at you and stun lock you in the air, and that could, she might get a couple right clicks off on you and kill you there. But overall, I think it's not a too bad matchup. I just think that she's a little bit undertuned. We'll see how the changes work on her in Season 1, but I don't think she's too much of a threat since the damage is more consistent. So if there is a Scarlet Witch, again, you can just be playing cover. You can just go in and out. Your healers will be able to keep you topped up as long as you stay within their field of view. So not too much of a threat either. Also, when she uses her ultimate, you can either try to burst her down with all of your abilities, or you can just speed your team away behind cover. Either one works depending on the situation. All right, Spider-Man. So Spider-Man can be pretty annoying. Spider-Man, I think the biggest thing that you have to think about when you're playing against Spider-Man is when to activate your aura, when to use your goddess boost, right? So what I mean by that is when Spider-Man goes in, if he hits a web on you, he will follow up with an E to get to you. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like out here.
Sometimes, but at least maybe I can make it easier for other people.
So if he hits a web on you, he can use his E ability to bring himself to you. So that works even in the sky. Like if you manage to get hit, I know there's a flying bot here somewhere. Where is he? There he is. He can pull you to the sky. He can uppercut you. So what you want to do is try to figure out what direction he's going to be moving if he does dive in on you. So what I mean by that is he can go in. He'll probably uppercut you to do some extra damage. So if he does uppercut immediately, you can descend as fast as possible, and he'll miss a couple melees on you. You can try to do circles around him as well, since you have more horizontal mobility than he does when he's in the air. That can make you kind of a little bit harder to track. Just be aware that he can do a lot of damage. So if he is diving your team or diving your supports, stay kind of low to your supports so you stay within their immediate sights and you start to get healed immediately. If you do get hit by a web, just hit that need healing button very quickly. Also, I guess another little setting you probably should keep track of here. Make sure you set your need healing thing to something else that's not just the radial wheel. So I use caps lock, for instance, but normally it's on the radial wheel.
Is there a doctor in the house?
But if you set it to just a quick button tap instead, then as soon as you get tagged by a web, hit that button. Your supports will know that you're about to get attacked. Now, as I was going to say, the biggest threat for Spider-Man is actually him wasting your boost. So he can go in on you like this. He can just do a little damage and then just web out, right? So you won't be able to kill him during that time. But if he manages to get you to pop your E, then it's going to go on cooldown. Or you can use it for 8 seconds, and then it's going to go on cooldown for another 15. That gives him a huge window to just back up and then re-engage after those 8 seconds are over. And he's going to be a lot more threatening then, because you're going to do a lot less damage. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, it's kind of a skill matchup. especially with the faster projectile speeds from Season 1. I think it's going to be easier to hit moving targets like Spider-Man or Black Panther or something like that, who are constantly moving around very quickly. So I think the matchup sways a little bit more in Storm's favor than Spider-Man's, especially because you're probably going to be playing around your supports, so you'll get a little bit of heals and he won't be able to kill you immediately. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Make sure you don't pop your E too early. If you think he's going in just for a little poke, or you think you're definitely going to manage to survive, unless he's a direct threat to your life or he's all-inning your supports at that moment, don't pop your E, because usually it's used better against other players. Spider-Man's ultimate. So Spider-Man's ultimate is a pretty small sphere. Usually you'll be hovering a little bit higher than like what he can hit. So all you have to do is move a little bit to the side and out, and it won't really hit you anymore. You can try to help burst him down, but he does get a lot of bonus health. So unless the rest of your team is doing it as well, you're not really going to get too much value out of trying to hit him. So I think usually if he ults, just keep trying to hit other frontliners on the enemy team. Try to continue to hit your cleave shots until his ultimate is over, and then try to burst him down. Unless your team is already focusing him, in which case, focus him too. All right, Starlord. So I wasn't sure whether to put Starlord in the shooter or flanker category or flyer category, since he's kind of all three in one. He can fly around kind of freely with this, so he can get up pretty high. He can zap you down really quick with these guns. Let me just turn off the cooldown, or turn on cooldowns here, just so you can see how fast it takes. So he can do this, and you'll die pretty much almost every time at high rank. If their aim is even half decent, they can two-clip you if they get close enough. He's also kind of annoying to play against because, again, his dash here has iframes, so he can dodge your projectiles, he can dodge your right click, he can dodge your lightning bolts by chance, which does happen a lot. So just be aware that sometimes he might not take as much damage as you're expecting with your burst, since he might eat some of that damage with his iframes. If he does use his ultimate as well, just run. Like he can toast you out of the sky. If he knows where you are and he pops his ultimate, you will die pretty much. There's not really that much you can do against it unless you're already high up flanking. Try to, like, he's probably even more important than the support ultimates to monitor, because he will affect your positioning entirely. Like if he's on the other team and he has his ultimate, you know you can't be up in the air at all. You have to be ready to have cover, or you have to be so deep on a flank that he has no idea where you are. And if your team does start to focus him down, if they call him out and try to focus him down, you can do an appreciable amount of damage to him with your right click, your lightning bolt. So you can help out with that, especially with the faster projectiles as well. You can do some considerable damage to him. If he doesn't notice that you're there, just like Iron Man, if he's flying up in the air and he uses his ult, but you happen to be behind him, you can burst him down very quickly. A lot of times he's going to be focused on targets on the ground, so he's going to be looking down and he won't see you if you're to the sides or above him. And oftentimes the skyboxes go a lot higher than you might think on certain maps. So make sure to use high vertical cover against him if you can. Either that, very high vertical cover, or stay right next to your team. Yeah, Starlord is a big threat, so be careful around him. Especially, as I said earlier, with the Adam Warlock team up with him and Mantis. They both get cocoon, so even if you do manage to get a pick on him, he's going to cocoon, and he can kill you immediately since he will know where you are. So try to, if you do get his cocoon to pop, try to just get back to your team. There's a very low chance that you'll be able to 1v1 him, because you probably would have already used your E by that point. So just be aware of those cocoons, because those can be very, very annoying. All right. So that pretty much sums up flankers and flyers. I think we're going to talk about spammers next. So these are the characters I considered spammers just because they throw stuff down the chokes constantly. They have a lot of things going on, a lot of damage just thrown around everywhere. So let's talk about Moon Knight. So Moon Knight, sweet new skin, by the way. The Season 1 gold skin. Hope you guys got the chance to get the gold, because this is pretty sick, actually. I kind of want to main Moon Knight now. But he's not that mobile. He can glide around a little bit, but he's kind of slow moving, has a big hitbox, only 250 HP. So he's not good against Storm at all. His attacks are not very good against her, because usually you won't be playing right next to your team. If you are playing against Moon Knight, you can stay a little bit farther away from your tanks just so that bounces don't hit. But this is like trying to hit a Storm out of the air as Moon Knight is not easy. Like this is not very easy at all. God, like she moves so randomly. You have 3-shot bursts that are projectiles, so you have to lead, track, and flick all at the same time. It's not very easy to do. The only real threat that he has against you, which can be quite a big threat, is if you're playing next to a wall and he throws his onk down, see if one of these guys gets close to the wall. I don't think they're really doing it, but if he throws the Yonk next to the wall, it'll grab you and pull you towards the wall, and all he has to do is shoot it a couple times, and since you also only have 250 health and you don't move all that fast, he can do a lot of damage to you very, very quickly. So if he does pull you to it, make sure you have your ears tuned to listen for that noise and the Yonk getting placed down, and try to hit it as fast as you can. You can two-shot it with your projectiles. Previously, it kind of used to be hard to two-shot because you'll have a little bit of damage fall off, but with the extra damage, you should pretty much be able to two-shot it. So just keep that in mind. He can grapple a little bit, he can move a little bit, but he really doesn't move all that fast, so you definitely have the leg up on this guy, especially if you come at him from a flank or above. Like, you're gonna kill him almost every time. So I think she's a great counter to Moon Knight overall, and he really allows you to flank more often than against other DPS, since he doesn't really have much threat against you when you're in the sky. All right, Namor. Namor can be very annoying as well. So Namor, he has these squids that are basically just turrets. They're going to shoot you out of the sky within a range of 30 meters, I believe. So if you're anywhere near these squids, they're going to be shooting at you. It's going to hurt. Make sure you kill the squids as soon as possible. As with any other character, I mean, you should, if you have like a Mantis or Adam Warlock or some other hit scan on your team, make sure you let them know that squids have to be top priority this game, because they're going to be doing a lot of damage to you, and they ruin your flanks. Like, the biggest part of Storm's flanking ability is the fact that she can do it so silently, while other flankers will have to like hide behind a little cover, or they're going to make loud footstep noises, or like when they jump in, they're going to make a lot of noise somehow. But Storm floats around very, very quietly. So usually you can get flanks on people. You can get pretty close to them without them noticing, just because you don't have footsteps. But against Namor, the squids are just going to start shooting at you. They're going to hear a whistle. They're going to see where it's shooting, and they're going to know exactly where you are and start throwing stuff at you. Now, it is pretty hard for him to hit you out of the sky with his spears, but kind of Hawkeye-like. You never are quite sure when they're going to hit you, but when they hit you, they do a lot of damage. They can hit you pretty hard, especially if they headshot like that. But again, it still takes him like 3 shots to do that. So unless he has a squid out shooting you as well, that will hit pretty hard. He's usually not too much of a threat, since you can come over him vertically as well, and it's kind of hard for him to hit his projectiles from that angle. The only problem is he does have his shift too, so you can't really burst him down quite as easily. He'll get fully healed back up, and by then, usually your lightning will have subsided if you did pop it to try to kill him. So usually I'd say try not to amp up your aura just to kill a Namor, unless, you know, he's already used his bubble. He's also very hard to hit your ultimate against, just because he has that bubble. He can just use it, and it'll pretty much use up the entire duration of your ult. So don't really go for Namor with the ult unless, again, you know he hasn't used his bubble. Always aim for the squids first, and other than that, he shouldn't be too much of a problem. You just have to always make sure that you're taking out those squids as soon as possible. All right, Squirrel Girl. Again, not too much of a threat. She has a little bit of extra health, so she's a little bit harder to take down. Just 275 over 250. She can launch up in the air, and honestly, her projectiles are pretty large and do move pretty fast, so she can do pretty big burst damage to you. She flies up in the air, manages to get like a couple close range shots off, but like they do a large chunk of damage. But honestly, like, look at this. Like, it's kind of hard to hit storms out of the air, especially if you're moving randomly. Like, it's not going to be very easy for her to do it. You're pretty much completely safe from her ult since it stays on the ground, so you don't really need to worry about that at all. Her right clicks also, she's not really going to hit you out of the sky with it. Like, you can see it. It's very slow. Just move out of the way. Try not to play on the ground as much against Squirrel Girl. Try not to stay like right next to people in case you start taking projectile like explosion damage. But other than that, Squirrel Girl is very easy to play against. Probably one of the easiest characters in the game for her to play against. All right. So I think that sums it up for all the DPS. I think I've talked about everybody here now. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about Vanguards now. So I am splitting this up into 2 categories as well. We're going to talk about frontliners, and then we're going to talk about divers. So by frontliners, I mean these are usually the tanks with shields that stay up in the front, just hold the front line for their team. And for divers, those are the guys who either dive straight in through the front entrance or try to flank and attack your back line from the side or whatever. So we're going to start off with Doctor Strange here. I think Doctor Strange is probably one of the biggest threats to Storm in the game. He has that shield, so it'll constantly be blocking your cleave shots. So if you do shoot at a Doctor Strange shield, the shot will stop right there. It won't go through it. Just be aware of that. You can still help spam it down since it, I think the recharge rate was slightly nerfed in Season 1, so you should be able to break your shield a little more easily. But I think the biggest threat about Doctor Strange is that he could just use his shift to fly up to you, and he does a lot more damage close up than you do, and has a lot more health than you do. So make sure you keep track of his shift cooldown. Make sure you know when he's capable of flying up. Now, a lot of Doctor Stranges, especially when they want to use their ult, they're going to fly up in the air first. So they're going to like fly up. They're going to try to move forward since it gives them a little boost, and then they're going to drop on the team. Oops, I just hit shift again by accident because it's oh, you can't even cancel it when there's no ability cooldowns. That's why. But he'll drop on your team and he'll land your his ultimate on your team. It's quite a large radius too, so make sure you stay farther away from him than you might think. Like the radius on his Q actually goes all the way out to like there. Like it's like 10 meters away from him. It's very scary. It hits up in the air quite high, and when you get hit when you're up in the air too, you don't just stay where you are. Your body falls to the ground, but your ghost goes even farther up and away, and it just hovers there. So you're a very, very easy target when he hits his ult on you. It's the same thing with his E as well, though I think that also got a nerf this time around. So previously, when he deals damage, he builds up to 100% here. When he gets to 100%, he takes a lot of damage, or he gets anti-healed. But he can press his E to purge that and do a bunch of damage around him. Now, previously, there was no damage fall off on that. It would just do full damage to you. But now, I don't think the E should be as much of a threat since there's going to be damage fall off past a certain radius. So at least the damage will be decreased a little bit. But I still think he's a huge threat there. The one thing that I think Storm is good against Doctor Strange about is his portals. So he's gonna place his portals here. He's going to move his team onto the point maybe to contest overtime. But on the other end, like you can be aware that this portal is here. You can fly above it. You can fly behind it. You know that they're all going to be grouped up right there. So this is an easy opportunity to hit a lot of people with your aura lightning, or it's a great time to pop your ultimate and explode everybody as they come out of the portal. Just be aware. Also, a little niche tip when you're playing with Storm, actually, and you're using the portals. So a lot of the times when Strange are going to use portals, they're going to like put it up above the point or whatever, so you can like drop in on it. But if you're playing Storm, you're going to want to actually go through the portal backwards. And why? Because when you go through the portal backwards, you can use the portal space itself as natural cover. So you can use it to hide behind and continue to shoot from. So instead of just face checking and walking straight in through with your team, you can go through the portal backwards, use it as cover, and you won't get exploded as fast when you go through the portal. So definitely make use of that tech. I think that's been a huge part of a lot of big plays for me personally in Grandmaster. Having that extra cover when you go through the portal is very, very valuable. All right, let's move on to talk about Groot. So Groot is kind of a punching bag. He is such a wide hitbox. You can pretty much hit him every time with projectiles if you try to hit him. The only thing you have to worry about is his walls. Now, they might end up blocking your shots a little bit. So just be aware of that. But you can hover slightly above them, honestly, and just peek over them slightly. So let's say the wall was like right there in front of me where it was. I can just hover right above it and shoot down at Groot, right? I can use it as partial cover. So that's another thing I didn't really talk about too much when I was talking about the camera, but when you always want to peek right corners, obviously, but you always want to peek low to high, not high to low. So say there's a bunch of people on this high ground. You want to attack like this, right? You can cover in and out. You're only showing half your body at a time. You can use your amp lightning to zap back up for 2 seconds, zap, zap, like that. And you can do a lot of damage to people on high ground by doing that. And they don't really have much threat to you because you can just hug this wall at any height. Like you don't really have to worry about it too much. If they walk up all the way to the edge, it kind of puts them in a vulnerable place because it'll expose them more to your team on low ground. So I think Storm is probably one of the best high ground contesters in the game, as long as there's no one else behind you that can hit you in the back there. And make sure on the opposite end of that spectrum, never peek high to low. So let's just say I was trying to use this piece of cover and there's someone like way down on the ground. I don't want to be up here and peeking down like this to try to hit them, because they can see my body fully exposed like right about now. If they were standing like right there, they could see me fully exposed already, and I can't really hit them yet. So just be aware, they will see you a lot faster than you see them. If you do want to use vertical cover like this that drops, I say do it backwards and wait until they come through the choke itself, past the cover. And that way you can drop straight down on them and do a lot of damage to them. And it's more frustrating for them to look straight up, but you are very, very vulnerable if you try to peek like this. This is probably even worse than peeking to the left, because at least when you peek to the left, you have a little bit of extra camera space on the left side of your character that you can use to see and like get your shot ready. But when you're peeking from vertically and you drop down, it's really, really bad, because you're going to completely expose yourself for like several seconds before you can even get a shot off. So pretty much just never do that. All right, let's talk about Magneto. Actually, wait, one more last thing about Groot. So Groot's ult does reach a little bit higher than you might think. Explodes in that whole radius, kind of the same size as a Strange ult. So if you are even a little bit in that radius, it will suck you, grab you in. You're probably going to die. But Groot's ultimate, if he is on your team, also has great potential, because Storm's abilities obviously all cleave, so you can just shoot right through the entire group of people who are there, and do a ton of damage to them. Even if you don't even pop your E, even if you don't pop your ult, you can pretty much guarantee kills on them just because you do so much damage to everybody all at once. Okay, let's talk about Magneto. So Magneto, much like Strange, is kind of a huge threat. He can mess with your positioning with his right click. That'll knock you back. He can bubble people if they get low. So he's much harder to get picks against. Yeah, he is the shield to hold down the front line that will eat your primary attacks. So you won't be able to cleave through him as often, especially if there's a Doctor Strange and a Magneto at once. You're probably better off just flanking most of the time, rather than just shooting straight down the middle, since so much damage is going to be blocked by shields and you won't be able to get much cleave damage. You won't charge your ult very fast at all. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, he's relatively easy to play against. Just watch out. His ultimate will eat projectiles in a sphere around himself, but he probably won't really aim it at you unless there's a backboard, like say you're up against the wall, then he'll probably try to hit you with it. But again, just like Iron Man ult, the only real threat for his ult is air-to-airing you, and it's kind of hard to do, since I know it's a little bit bigger than Iron Man's, but it moves slower. It's kind of awkward to aim in the midair, since he does have to point somewhere, and if he points it right at you, you can just move it out of the way. But if he points it on a point behind you, it's kind of hard to aim precisely. So, problem with the third-person camera for him, but it does benefit us as flying characters. So he's not too much of a threat to you unless he tries to maintain this constant range. So his projectiles always explode at this constant range, and if he manages to stay at that range, he can do pretty good consistent damage to you. So just try to stay either farther away or closer than that, and it will be much harder for him to hit you directly. But overall, not too difficult to play against, just really slows down the pace of the game. All right, now let's talk about Peni Parker. So Peni is going to be holding down the front line. She's going to have her shift ability here, her like spider nest. She's going to be growing the spider nest out, so all these spiders are going to be pushing into your tanks, and they're going to be doing a lot of damage. So make sure, if you can see it, usually you can get a pretty good angle on it, since you can fly around and go very high and stay relatively safe while you do it. You can poke it down from a distance. You might not do a ton of damage, but you can definitely kill it easily. So if she does have it up, make sure you hunt that down first, just so your tanks can keep advancing. Try to be aware that mines can still hit you, and you can't really move out of the way fast enough, since you are kind of slow as Storm. Watch out for her right clicks, though. This is by far the biggest threat for her, is that she has a stun on the 4-second cooldown that will just drop you out of the sky. So they're relatively wide, but oftentimes she doesn't really aim for you. I mean, if she does use it on you, like it actually is kind of hard to hit, to be honest. Like that doesn't even hit. There we go. And you don't even drop fully to the ground, since it's only like a half-second stun. So if you stay high enough, you won't drop all the way to the ground. You won't be too vulnerable. But otherwise, much like Groot, she's pretty much a punching bag. She's doesn't have a shield to block the cleave shots. So between her and Groot, you can just cleave through both of them, hit the back line, do a ton of damage, pretty much out. Like, you just can't really heal through it. So yeah, she's pretty easy to play against. Probably the easiest tank to play against overall. All right, now it's time to talk about dive tanks. So Hulk. Bruce Banner. So Hulk can be kind of scary. He can shield himself to block damage or to shield his teammates as well. He can grab you out of the air. Let's see if I can actually do this right now. But a good Hulk... Oh, whoops. It ended. But a good Hulk, if you didn't know, if you jump through the air as Hulk, it grabs flying characters and it brings them all the way to the ground. It'll slam them on the ground. It'll do some damage. You'll stay on the ground there for a second. He can burst you down pretty good. It'll hurt a lot. Actually, I'm just going to cancel this so I can show this more easily since I'm really bad. Movements, they're going to be static. Okay, let's try this now. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like playing against Hulk. He has a ton of health, so you really shouldn't target him unless he's completely alone along with your team. But he can jump at you, take you out of the sky, and just beat you down. Do a ton of damage to you very quickly. If he exiles you as well, it'll also drop you to the ground. So he has 2 ways to drop you down to the ground. So I think he is probably one of the biggest threats, again, especially because he applies so much pressure to your backline, and there's not too much you can do about it. Unlike some of like the dive or like flankers or the brawlers for the duelists, he has a ton more health. He is so much harder to deal with. Like I think you should probably try to ban him every game too if you can. Another big threatening part of his kit is that obviously that power up with Iron Man that gives him the gamma ray beam that just makes him do so much more damage, makes him harder to duel as well. So overall, I think Hulk is a huge threat, especially in higher elos when teams actually play around him and play well together. He's very threatening. You can't really do too much damage to him at times. So you're not great with single target damage. So if there is a Hulk in the game you're playing against him, usually you're better off trying to flank his healers or DPS, unless he's totally alone with your team, and then you can try to burst him down. But he's pretty scary, so just keep that in mind. Also, when he ults, he'll just gain an insane amount of health. Pretty much become impossible to kill for you. And he can constantly, every like 2 seconds, or every 1 second actually, he can just, oh no, every 2 seconds, I think I just have the cooldowns on. He can fire his right click up in the air and do like 100 damage to you, so watch out for that too. If he's ulting, he might try to hit you with that. Okay, so that is Hulk. Let's talk about Captain America. So Captain America is not that much of a threat to you too. He got a little bit of a buff here with 675 health instead of 650. His shield can reflect your projectiles, but it does not reflect your lightning, I think. Really the only ways that he can damage you is with his shield throw with E. So I'll show you that. And that can bounce between multiple targets as well, or he can bounce it off a wall to hit you. He can jump up in the air and try to punch you a little bit, but honestly, if you stay even this high, like he just really won't be able to hit you. If he does manage to get 2 hits on somebody, the next 4 of his abilities, or 4 attacks, throw his shield up in the air. So that's really the only time he's able to hit you. It's still kind of hard to hit them. They do home a little bit, but still, they do have some travel time. So he's not really too much of a threat to you either. Just be aware that his ultimate can also help out heal your ult. It pretty much nullifies your amped E as well. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, he's pretty easy to target, relatively wide hitbox. You can burst him down pretty quickly if he does dive your support. So treat him like you would any other brawler. Yeah, that's about it for him. He's not too much of a threat. Let's talk about Thor. So Thor. He is also not really that great against Storm. Pretty easy to play against as her. So the only way he can deal damage really is to just throw his hammer up in the air, but then he can't get his Thor Force back to keep doing that cooldown since he runs out of hammers here. If you didn't know how to play Thor, then he gets Thor Force back every time he hits someone with his hammer. He gets some Thor Force that he uses to power his abilities that are on a global 2-second cooldown. So either he can choose to try to dash at you, hit you out of the sky. It might hit you a couple times there, but he'll always drop back down. And if you go higher than he can dash, like there's really just nothing he can do against you. But again, he actually has a similar play style to Storm in that a lot of the time, if he's not trying to flank, like he's going to alternate between the same 2 play styles that you do, right? So he's going to be playing, obviously, with his front line. He's going to be popping his F, though, and he's going to be throwing these lightning strikes to like cleave through your team and try to do some damage. And that can do a lot of damage to you, too, in the sky. So just keep an eye out for that. If he does pop it, he's pretty vulnerable while he's doing it, but make sure that you're moving around and using cover so he doesn't just like 3-shot you out of the sky with it, or 4-shot. I think it does like 70 damage, but still, it's a lot of damage very fast. But other than that, just try to keep stay like high in the air. He has really, really wide hitboxes, so you can hit him with every projectile, no problem. He doesn't move too far too fast, so you can usually get away with hitting with all your lightning strikes with your empty as well. And his ult, just be aware, he can go very high with it. The slam itself probably won't damage you since you're not going to be low enough to get that damage, but just be aware. If you are low on health and he's right below you, he could ult and it could tick you a couple times and do a little bit of damage. So just be aware that that is a possibility. So try to stay up and to the side if you know he has ult. But again, not too much of a threat with that. And then we got Venom. So Venom is a lot like Hulk. He has a ton of health. You can't really do too much to him. He's just going to be harassing your backline the whole time. You could try to deal a little bit of damage to him, but honestly, most of your time, if you're playing against Venom, should be spent diving against their backline, trying to do the same role that he is to yours. Just annoying them, trying to kill their supports. If you can kill his healers, he'll start to whittle down over time eventually. He does do a considerable amount of damage, but his attacks don't really have too much range. So you can easily kind of just stay out of range of that. Let me just check what the range is like on his attacks here. So he can hit here. He can still hit this far. Okay, so this is about as far away as he can hit. But obviously, when you're moving around, he has the same problem that Moon Knight does, where it's like kind of a delayed burst. That makes it kind of hard. So he has to like flick and track all at the same time and lead a little bit because there's a delay. So it's kind of hard for him to deal very consistent damage to you. But just know that he has a ton of health. Probably don't focus him down again, unless just like Hulk, if he's in the middle of your team and there's no one else around, definitely help take him down. But also make sure you try to stay out of range of his right click as well. If he does attach to you, it'll slow you down. And then that second burst, if you manage to stay in it, that does a lot of damage. Like, you notice how much damage that does? If he dives into your team, try to stay high enough that the right click won't hit you, and then you'll be able to help a lot more. Otherwise, you're just going to be a burden to your supports because he's going to be doing a lot of damage to you just with that. His ult, again, pretty much no threat to you. He just goes underground, chomps up right on top of him. So just stay up in the air. Won't be able to do anything. All right. I think that sums up what it's like to play against every single hero as Storm. Now, just to finish it off, I think I want to give some tips for playing against Storm, since you're probably going to be doing that more often than you're going to be playing her, especially since she's going to be getting a lot more usage recently. A lot of people don't really know how to play against her. And especially if people utilize some of the strategies that I talked about in this video, then she might be pretty frustrating to play against sometimes. So use these strategies if you can to stay on top of it. So be aware of her position at all times. You might not hear her like you will with some other heroes. She might be flying very high. If you know they have a Storm, if she's flanked you before, just keep an eye out. Like if you're walking through a choke, make sure that you check corners very quickly. Just like look up to the sides real quick before you keep moving forward. It only takes like a couple milliseconds. Like you would just quickly check as many corners as you can. If you do spot her out, ping her, she'll die. Like your team can turn on her, she can die very easily. So just make sure you keep track of where she is, where she might be. And again, as I was talking about, like with Spider-Man, make sure you monitor for her E usage. So if you are playing a flanker, if you dive in and you see her pop it, you can see this aura now. Like if she activates it, you can now see this aura as the enemy. So you can see where you'll start taking damage. So there's two things you want to do with that knowledge, right? First off, don't go inside of it if you don't have to. You're going to get shocked. It's going to hurt. So just don't do it. If you do dive and she pops it, use whatever mobility you have to get out. And then go back in after the 8 seconds is up, because then she'll be a lot less helpful to her team, and you might be able to just pick off a support or pick off her. So keep track of that cooldown. She only has an uptime of about 1/3 using it, so most of the time you will be safe to dive. Just be aware of that. Monitor her ult charge as well. That's right. So make sure, since her ult does a ton of damage, especially if you're a support, make that your #1 priority. Like, do not pop your support ult unless she ults. Like, it doesn't really matter what else is happening to your team, unless something else is equally as threatening as Storm ult, which very few things could be. Maybe if your whole team gets stuck in a Groot ult or gets hit by Doctor Strange's Agamotto or something like that, then you can pop your ult, but you pretty much want to hold it at all times. Make it so she can't use her ult as often as possible, and you should be okay. Because it's very easy to counter. Once you hear the Wrath of the Goddess.
Feel the wrath of the goddess!
You can wait a little bit. Wait until the exact moment she pops out, too, to use it. Because you never know where she's going to go, too. Your teammates will be aware of it as well. I mean, you have to expect them to be. If not, then it's a skill issue, and you'll keep ranking up, and they won't. So eventually they'll get to a rank where they do.
I bring thunder.
But yeah, make sure your teammates, if you are support, gather around you. Try to get as many teammates around you as you can, and then pop your ultimate then. Because if you split up, she'll be able to pick off somebody, and then you would have wasted your support ult, and it's not a good look. So, yeah, one more thing. So do not stand directly behind teammates when she's poking. You'll get hit. So I know a lot of tanks are going to try to block shots, try to throw their body in front of people to block damage. Doesn't work against Storm. If you're a support trying to hide behind your tanks, doesn't work against Storm. So her left clicks and her right clicks cleave. So it doesn't matter if you're low and you're behind a tank, she will kill you. She can still kill you. So just be aware of like long passages as well. Like there's several maps, I feel like, where there's long passages that you have to push down through. Like everybody coming through a narrow choke, like she will be spamming it. She would like try to get through that choke as fast as possible, or preferably split up around flanks, or take another route that isn't as narrow if you can. Yeah, I think that is like pretty much it. Trying to think if there's anything else, but no, other than that, I think I'm very excited to start playing Storm in Season 1. I hope you guys are too. I think she's going to be a lot stronger here, a lot more damage from range, so we're probably going to be seeing her a lot more often, and I hope this video helped you guys a lot. I've thought about it a lot. I've been playing a lot of Storm, and I can't wait to continue playing her. So thanks for watching, guys, and good luck out there.